Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern 2102. After 31 years of silence, the famed T1 comes storming back to the main line after a long and lengthy restoration. In this video, we cover the engine's first public excursion run from both on board and on the ground as it runs from Reading to Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. We see the T1 as it weaves its way around the Allegheny Mountains and also watch as it puts on an impressive show climbing up the steep grades north of Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. We're also along for the ride as it passes through the Tamaqua Tunnel and as it crosses the impressive Hometown Viaduct. We also get the chance to see plenty of other exciting things along the way. Now, with all that out of the way, let's hop on board and enjoy this Iron Horse Ramble. The date is May 28, 2022. We are located at the Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern's Reading Outer Station in Reading, Pennsylvania. The Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern Railroad, more commonly known as the Reading and Northern Railroad, is a second-class regional railroad in eastern Pennsylvania. Its main line runs from Reading, Pennsylvania to Pittston, Pennsylvania, just outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania, and consists of numerous branch lines. While the railroad is known for its fast freights and green and yellow diesels, it is best well known for its operation of steam locomotives. For a long time now, Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern 425, their venerable Pacific, has served as the railroad's main steam engine. But as of April 6, 2022, the Reading and Northern has finished their restoration of former Reading Railroad 2102, one of four surviving Reading T1 484s. We are located at the north end of the Reading Outer Station, eagerly awaiting for the 484 to back down onto the waiting passenger train. Today's train consists of 19 cars, which we'll talk about later. Soon we heard a high-pitched whistle in the distance, and we got to watch for the first time as 2102 backed down onto its waiting train. Now with 2102 at the station, let's talk about the history of this iron horse. It all began back in 1923. 2102 was originally built at the Baldwin Locomotive Works in Philadelphia for the Reading Railroad. But here's the kicker. It wasn't built as a 484. It was originally built as an I-10 SA Class 280 consolidation, originally numbered 2044. The I-10 SA Class locomotives were known as the largest consolidations to be built for any railroad. 2044 was used to haul heavy freight trains on the Reading's numerous branch lines and occasionally out on the main line. By the end of World War II, the Reading Railroad was looking for much more powerful and heavier locomotives to haul its freight trains out on the main line. But since the war was still going on, the Wartime Production Board declined the Reading Railroad from building any new locomotives. But they did allow them to rebuild any of their existing engines they had already. Now you know the old saying, right? Give an inch, they take a mile? Well, that's exactly what the Reading Railroad did. Between 1945 and 1947, just as World War II was finishing up, the railroad took 30 of their I-10 SA class locomotives, including 2044, into their Reading shops and quote-unquote rebuilt them as larger 484 Northerns. The railroad reclassified these new rebuilt engines as T1s and renumbered 2044 as 2102. With a new lease on life, 2102 continued to pull the railroad's freight trains until 1956. Sadly, by then, the Reading decided to retire their steam fleet in favor of diesel locomotives. But this wasn't the end for 2102, as by 1960, the engine was leased to the Carpenter Steel Company in Reading, Pennsylvania as a temporary emergency steam supply. Just a year before the engine went on loan, the Reading Railroad decided to introduce a steam excursion program known as the Iron Horse Rambles. The excursions proved to be a major success for the railroad, but unfortunately in 1961, by the end of that season, T1 2124, one of the engines used in the program, was found in need of major repairs before it could run again. Instead of repairing the engine, the Reading Railroad decided to retire 2124 from the excursions business and use 2102 as the replacement engine, as it had returned from loan that same year. Then, in 1962, 2102 was placed into the steam program and pulled many excursion trains for the Reading Railroad. Then, on October 17, 1964, the Reading Railroad ran its last Reading Ramble, and after that the program was shut down. After its time on the Reading, between 1967 and 1985, 2102 was sold to many different groups and pulled many excursion trains around the Midwest, New England, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Maryland, and New Jersey. In 1986, 2102 was sold one more time to Andrew Miller Jr., who owned the Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern Railroad. Once back on home rails, 2102 pulled many excursion trains for the Reading and Northern Railroad. The last run of 2102 occurred on October 27, 1991, when the railroad had the engine haul a special excursion train to Tamaqua called the Anthracite Express. Once the excursion was done, 2102 was taken out of service as it was due for an overhaul. Despite not running, The engine was retained by the Reading and Northern, being put on display on occasion. Then, on January 9, 2016, the railroad put 2102 into their newly built locomotive shops in Port Clinton, Pennsylvania, for not only an overhaul, but a complete restoration to like-new condition. After nearly 5 years of work, on January 10, 2021, 2102 was fired up for the first time in decades, and after another year, the steam engine rolled out of the locomotive shops under its own power. Before this first excursion run, 2102 was being tested between here and Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, notably pulling a couple of coal trains as part of the testing. After the testing phase, this brings us to now, with 2102 about to take off with its first excursion train after being out of service for so long. In order to celebrate the return of this magnificent steam engine, the Reading and Northern Railroad decided to run their own series of Iron Horse Rambles, which we are on now. Today's Iron Horse Ramble will run on the main line of the Reading and Northern Railroad between Reading's outer station to Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, and return, with a stop in Port Clinton, Pennsylvania along the way. Let's now get on board today's excursion train and take a ride behind this beautiful T1. I managed to get a vestibule with an open window close to the front of the train. The Reading and Northern doesn't play around with their schedules. The train was scheduled to leave at 9 o'clock, and right on the dot, 2102 was given the highball to leave Reading, and we were on our way. As our train leaves Reading, Pennsylvania, we make our way through the Reading, Blue Mountain and Northern's North Reading Transload Yard. Here is where the railroad assembles their famed North Reading Fast Freight, a non-stop freight train that runs from here straight to Pittston. Inside the yard today is a line of coal cars along with some box cars. As we near the end of the yard, we'll see the power that will be used on the NRFF later today. Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern 3055, 3057, and 3056 are all EMD SD40-2. 3055 and 3056 are former Union Pacific 3621 and 3440, being built in 1979 and 1978. 3057 is formerly Chicago and Northwestern 6901, being built in 1975. 5017, 5018, and 5049 are all EMD SD50s. 5017 and 5049 were both former Missouri Pacific engines, being built in 1984. 5018 was formerly Seaboard System 8507, being built in 1983. It is seen here wearing the Reading and Northern's new Fast Freight Service paint scheme, specifically painted for the NRFF. Besides the regular diesels, 3 Budd RDC-1s were also located here as well. 9167 was built in 1953 for the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad, as their 43. 9168 was built in 1950 for the New York Central Railroad, as their M499. 9166 was built in 1958 for the Boston and Maine Railroad, as their 6305. As we pass underneath U.S. Highway 222, we leave the yard and book it out onto the main line. Once out of the yard, we cross the Schuylkill River on the Peacock's Walk Viaduct. This stone arch bridge was built between 1853 and 1856 for the Reading Railroad. We are now approaching the town of Leesport, Pennsylvania. While my sibling and I were riding the train, my dad was chasing the train with my other camera, and Leesport was the first place he set up, right on Railroad Avenue. Here we'll get off the train and watch as it storms through the now crowded village. Just after crossing the Irish Creek, our train passes by a newly built siding. The Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern Railroad has been working hard to improve their main line between Reading, Pennsylvania and Pittston, Pennsylvania, with new tracks and a new signaling system along the main line. As you've already seen, instead of modern signals, the Reading and Northern has opted to use the classic-looking US&S tricolor light signals to operate their main line. We'll see some more fun-looking signals as we continue down the line. As we continue along the siding, we found some more freight cars stored here. As our train continues up the line, let's talk about the passenger cars on board today's train. The first car just behind 2102 is Reading and Northern's generator car 1250. Although 1250 looks like a regular baggage car at first glance, the car houses a generator to provide power and light for the rest of the train. From what I was able to research, this car can trace its roots back to the Michigan Central Railroad and was later operated by the New York Central Railroad as their 8480. It was possibly built in 1926. Although the car provides a completely different service now, it still looks great right behind the locomotive. The next 6 cars behind 1250 are ex-Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western MU cars. These cars used to be self-propelled passenger cars, powered by an overhead catenary wire. They operated in commuter train service in New Jersey between 1929 and 1984, when they were replaced by much more modern equipment. The Reading and Northern ended up buying some of these cars that same year and rebuilt them as regular passenger cars. Ever since then, they have been the backbone of the Reading and Northern's passenger trains. The next car on the train was a last-minute addition, Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern 1168. 1168, the Sunset Grill, was built in 1950 by the Budd Company of Philadelphia for the Southern Pacific Railroad as their 2988. It was a 40-seat club lounge car that included a valet/stewardess room with a shower. After Amtrak took over the nation's passenger network, the SP sold 2988 to them in 1971. They rebuilt the car into an auto train cafe car, removing the valet/stewardess rooms and the shower, and renumbered it to 8701. After a good amount of time spent crisscrossing the country, Amtrak finally retired the venerable coach car in 1995. Over the next couple of decades, the car was sold to a couple of other owners, until 2021, when it was finally acquired by the Reading and Northern Railroad. The next 3 cars after that car were also former Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western MU cars. After those MU cars, the next 2 cars were Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern 452, the Gila Valley, and 453, the San Luis Valley. These cars are ex-Southern Railway heavyweight coach cars, with their previous owners, the Iowa Pacific's Rio Grande Scenic Railroad, still painted on them. The next car on the train is Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern number 4, the Lehigh Gorge Explorer Superdome. This is one of the first-class cars on the train. The Superdome was built in 1952 by the Pullman Standard Company for the Milwaukee Road to run between Chicago and Seattle, Washington, on their famed Olympian Hiawatha. It also ran on their famed Twin Cities Hiawatha between the Twin Cities of Minnesota and Chicago. The Superdome was acquired by the Reading and Northern back in 2021 from the Iowa Pacific. After number 4 is Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern number 6, the Scenic View. This car was built in 1954 by the Budd Company as their big dome lounge car for the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway. It ran on the railway's premier passenger trains until 1971, when Amtrak took over the nation's passenger network. Instead of selling the car to Amtrak, the Santa Fe opted to sell the car to Auto Train, a passenger rail operator that ran passenger trains between D.C. and Florida. After its time on Auto Train, number 6 eventually found its way to Iowa Pacific, where it was operated by them until being acquired by the Reading and Northern Railroad sometime recently. The next car, after the pair of domes, was the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway 212. 212 is an ex-Reading MU car, following a similar story to the ex-Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western cars. The car was built in the late 1920s by the Bethlehem Steel Company and ran commuter train service out of Philadelphia. By 1990, the car, along with its other siblings, were finally retired by their new owner SEPTA and replaced by much more modern equipment. 212, along with 7 other cars, were sold to the Reading and Northern Railroad and have been here ever since. After car number 212 is Reading and Northern car number 8, the Mouse Chunk Club Car. This car is the Reading and Northern's first-class accommodations car. If you wish to ride in style on the road of anthracite, this is the car for you. The car was built in 1918 by the Pullman Company, originally as a seating car. In 1951, the car was rebuilt at the Burnside Shops in Chicago as a blunt-end club/lounge/observation car and given the new name Calumet Club. After being rebuilt, it was operated on the Illinois Central's City of New Orleans until Amtrak took over the service. After the IC, it was sold to various different owners. Its last owner was the Iowa Pacific. In 2021, the Reading and Northern acquired the Calumet Club and refurbished the coach that same year, renaming the car as the Munch Chunk Club. After the Munch Chunk Club car is Reading and Northern car number 2, the Hickory Run. The Hickory Run is another first-class car, but unlike the other cars, Hickory Run is an all-steel heavyweight sleeper car. It offers 10 rooms for passengers to ride in with privacy. The car was built in the late 1920s by the Pullman Company with 14 single bedrooms. It was originally named the Night Trail and ran on numerous passenger trains across the nation. In 1948, the car was leased to the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad, where it ran on passenger trains between New York City and New England. It stayed there until 1964, when the car was officially retired by Pullman. After its career with Pullman, it bounced around from owner to owner. One of the owners reconfigured one of the rooms into a mini kitchen and 3 of the other rooms into a small parlor area, only leaving 10 rooms left. Eventually, in 1998, the car was purchased by the Reading and Northern Railroad, but only recently was refurbished by them. Now that I think about it, I believe this is the first excursion train I have ever seen to offer private room accommodations. If any of you guys have witnessed any other excursion trains that offer similar accommodations, please let me know down in the comment section down below. The last car on today's excursion train is Reading, Blue Mountain, and Northern number 7, King Cole. King Cole was built in 1916 as a heavyweight 88-seat coach for the Illinois Central Railroad. In 1947, the IC completely rebuilt the coach car as a streamlined observation lounge car for their famed City of New Orleans passenger train. It was also given the name Mardi Gras. It operated on the City of New Orleans until 1968, when the car was retired from the service. After its time on the Illinois Central, it kept bouncing around from owner to owner. One notable owner included the Roanoke Chapter NRHS, which operated the car on many steam excursions in the 1990s, behind 611, 1218, and many others. By the 2010s, the car was sold to Iowa Pacific, where it was restored back to its IC colors. It operated with them until it was sold in 2021 to the Reading and Northern Railroad. Once on the R&N property, the car was refurbished as King Cole, ready to lead a new life on the Reading and Northern Railroad. We are now pulling into our next stop, Port Clinton, Pennsylvania. As we pull into the station, we'll see the Reading and Northern's diesel locomotive shops, where the railroad maintains their fleet of diesel engines. The railroad also has a small yard here and is where the Reading and Northern's Pottsville branch meets the main line. As we approach the locomotive shops, we can see two of the Reading and Northern's F units in the back, Reading and Northern 250 and 251. Both engines are EMD F7As, being built in 1953 for the Bessemer and Lake Erie Railroad as 727A and 728A respectively. After working for the Bessemer, both engines were sold to the Southern Railway Company of New Jersey. 727A was given its Rock Island-inspired colors, while 728A was given its New York, Ontario, and Western colors. They stayed with the SRCNJ until 2017, when they were sold off to the Reading and Northern Railroad. Emerging onto the front face of the locomotive shops, we can see the railroad's many engines awaiting to either enter the shops or to pull a train. Although we can't see it, Port Clinton has a beautiful looking passenger station, as well as a car repair shop. This is also the home of the Reading and Northern's headquarters and the Reading and Northern's steam locomotive shops. The latter we'll see as we leave town. Our stop here wasn't too long. Once the new passengers were on board, the train highballed it out of town. As we leave town, we'll jump off the train and watch it as it passes the Broad Street Railroad crossing here in Port Clinton. After passing the Broad Street Railroad crossing, we'll now see the Reading and Northern's steam locomotive shop. The first large building we see is the steam locomotive shops themselves. Built in a similar vein to a roundhouse, this is where the railroad maintains both 2102 and 425. Up next is the turntable, and right after that is the Reading and Northern's wheel turn shop. This is where the railroad is able to take off the wheels of any of their engines and have them either repaired or replaced, and that includes the steam engines. Right behind the shop, we see one of the Reading and Northern's passenger cars along with one of their gondola cars. That is where the railroad normally paints their equipment. As we just saw, the passenger car has just acquired a red coat of paint. Ever since we left Hamburg, we have entered into the railroad's namesake mountain, Blue Mountain. Blue Mountain is a mountain range that runs for 150 miles from the Delaware Water Gap east of Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, to the Big Gap west of Upper Strasburg, Pennsylvania. The majority height of the mountain range ranges between 1,400 feet and 1,700 feet above sea level, but the highest point of the range lies near Newburgh, Pennsylvania, just north of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. The mountain's highest point there is 2,270 feet above sea level. Although the range is a formidable barrier, there are at least 4 natural waterways that cut through the mountain. Ever since we left Reading, Pennsylvania, we have been following the Schuylkill River, which is one of the said waterways that cut through the mountain. Between Hamburg and Auburn, Pennsylvania, the Schuylkill River cuts around a 5-mile-long gap through the mountain. But in Port Clinton, the river splits. We are now following the Little Schuylkill River, which runs from Port Clinton to just north of hometown Pennsylvania. Using the Little Schuylkill River turns a 5-mile jaunt across Blue Mountain into a 3-mile jaunt between Hamburg and Molino, Pennsylvania. Both rivers provide the R&N's former operator of the line, the Reading Railroad, a great way of crossing Blue Mountain. Unfortunately, as the day progressed, heavy rainstorms came in. It stayed like this all the way up until we reached Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. We'll now sit back and relax as we watch 2102 storm down the main line between here and Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. We are now approaching South Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. Here, after we pass the Wildcat Road Railroad crossing, Clamtown Road / Road 443 parallels the tracks here. Unfortunately, 443 was on the other side of the train when I took this shot. We'll now hop off the train and watch again as 2102 rounds the curve at the American Premium Coal Plant along Clamtown Road in South Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, after watching the train pass by here, my dad wasn't able to catch up with the train again until he reached Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. So for now, we'll hop back on board the train and watch as 2102 assaults the grades north of Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. As we continue along the line, we get an excellent view of a portion of the American Premium Coal Plant. This place is where American Premium Coal mines and stores and sells its supply of Pennsylvania-famed anthracite coal. American Premium Coal can supply the East Coast with what they call premium coal and can ship it out either by truck or by rail. As we approach Tamaqua, Pennsylvania, the first thing we see is the Reading and Northern's yard south of town. This yard is where 3 of the Reading and Northern's branch lines begin. The first branch line runs from Tamaqua to Lensford, Pennsylvania. The second and third branches begin northwest of Tamaqua. The second branch begins at a place called East Makinoy Junction and runs all the way to Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. The third branch begins at a place called Hawks, Pennsylvania, just north of East Makinoy Junction, and runs to Hazleton, Pennsylvania. The branch line also has numerous other smaller branch lines that connect to this line. As we approach the north end of the yard, we see the power for the branch line trains. Parked in the sidings is Reading and Northern 3054, 5020, 3069, 2012, 2533, and 5019. Reading and Northern 3054 and 3069 are both EMD SP40-2s. 3054 was built for the Chicago and Northwestern Railway in 1974, and 3069 was built in 1978 for Conrail. 2012 is an EMD GP38-2 built for the Southern Railway in 1979. The engine used to be a high hood, but was later rebuilt with an Amroll cab. 2533 is an EMD GP30, built for the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway in 1963. 5020 and 5019 are both EMD SD50s. Both engines were built in 1984. 5020 for the B&O Railroad during the chassis system era, and 5019 for the seaboard system. Just as we pass the West Broad Street Railroad crossing, we are also passing the old Tamaqua passenger station, which is on the other side of the train. We'll get to see the station later on in the video. As we go through Tamaqua, Pennsylvania, 2102 begins tackling the toughest stretch of the journey. From here to the summit of the climb at Hawks, 2102 will be climbing the steepest grades on the railroad line, ranging around 1.5%. Combining it with the rainy weather we've been having today, 2102 was in for a tough climb. For most of the way up to Hawks, the line will be following both the Little Schuylkill River and Pine Creek. As we continue the climb to the summit, we'll go through the Tamaqua Tunnel. The Tamaqua Tunnel is a 926-foot bore going right underneath a hill. It helps the line better follow the Little Schuylkill River as the river runs around the hill instead. It was built in 1854 by the Reading Railroad. During the trip, I thought it would be an interesting idea to ride through the tunnel in the open vestibule I was in. Besides me, a few other people had the same idea and gathered in the vestibule. Now this would soon prove to be not one of my best ideas. As soon as our car plunged into the Tamaqua tunnel, all the breathable air left and was rapidly replaced by smoke coming from 2102. To make a long story short, unless you want to play Hold Your Breath with 2102, don't ride through the tunnel in the open vestibule. By the time our car got out of the tunnel, we were all gasping for clean air. We have now reached the highest point of our journey to Jim Thorpe. At the beginning, back at the Reading Outer Station, we started at around 300 feet above sea level. But now, here at Hawks, we are just at around 1,200 feet above sea level. With the toughest part of the journey out of the way now, we only have a few small hills to tackle before making our steep descent down to Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. Ever since we left Reading, Pennsylvania, we have been riding the rails that used to belong to 2102's former owner, the Reading Railroad. Here at Hawks Junction, we are now leaving the former Reading Railroad and entering onto the old rails of the Central Railroad of New Jersey. We'll be staying on the old C&J the rest of the way to Jim Thorpe. The Reading and Northern Rail System is made up of plenty of former anthracite roads, as they were called. Besides the C&J and Reading, the Reading and Northern also has tracks of the former Lehigh Valley, Delaware, Lackawanna and Western Railroad, the Lehigh and New England Railroad, the Pennsylvania Railroad, and some Conrail tracks. The Conrail tracks were added when they acquired all the system that makes up the present Reading and Northern Railroad. We are now approaching the Hometown Trestle. The Hometown Trestle is a steel structure built in 1931 by the Central Railroad of New Jersey. It was built to replace a wooden trestle bridge built back in the 1880s. The bridge span is 981 feet long and 157 feet tall at its tallest point. The bridge was built to cross the Little Schuylkill River in the valley below.
this is not the good spot. You should have been in here when we went through the tunnel. I knew
You
it was
were in here with us?
Yes. Along with 4 other guys. Not going, ugh. I know, that was scary. Like, there's like, I'm on this side and there's no track on the other side. So I was like, oh, where's that track on? Dear Lord.
After passing Lake Drive, we now begin the descent as we make our way to Jim Thorpe. The steepest part of our descent will be between the Industrial Road Railroad crossing west of Nuscahoning, Pennsylvania, and the Nuscahoning Junction, where the gradients average between 1 and 1 1/4%. As we approach Nuscahoning, Pennsylvania, the railroad line parallels Route 54/Stock Street in the town. As always with steam excursions and parallel roads, rail fans always love to pace the train, much to the chagrin of the residents and locals, as this person laying on the horn shows. We are now entering Nuscahoning, Pennsylvania, the last town before we arrive in Jim Thorpe. As you'll see, the town on the west side is a great place to see trains on the Reading and Northern roll by on the main line, and is a great place on the line for pacing action as well. As we leave town, we'll pass through the short but notable Nuscahoning Tunnel. The Nuscahoning Tunnel was built in 1959 by the Central Railroad of New Jersey. It carries Route 93/Hunter Street across the railroad. The tunnel is also used as a road access to get to the Nuscahoning Sewer Treatment Plant. Ever since we left the Lake Drive Railroad crossing near hometown PA, we have been following the Nuscahoning Creek, which flows into the Lehigh River just before Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania.
total run-by spot?
I don't know where it's at.
Oh, okay. So I didn't know if we were stopping here or not.
No. The switch behind.
Oh, okay. So I stopped.
5 miles out.
All right.
We are now approaching Jim Thorpe Junction. Jim Thorpe Junction is a Y where the Reading and Northern's main line to Pittston and the branch, the Jim Thorpe, split up. The line, splitting off to the left, is a new connecting track built by the Reading and Northern, carrying the present-day main line to Pittston across the Lehigh River. The bridge carrying the new track is called the Lehigh River Bridge. The older-looking bridge just beyond the new bridge is the other part of the Y and carries the old main line. That bridge is called the Lehigh Gorge Trail Bridge. Where you can see the signal across both bridges is where both tracks come together. That connecting track was open for rail traffic only a few years ago, back in 2020. Before 2020, Reading and Northern trains traveling between Reading, Pennsylvania and Pittston had to pull into Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. There, they ran around their trains before continuing on their journeys. With the new track arrangement, trains just simply take the junction across the Lehigh River. At the time of our ride, the Reading and Northern was installing new signals on the junction. We are now passing the track that goes across the Lehigh Gorge Trail Bridge. The reason why it's called that is because not only does it carry the railroad across the river, but it also carries the Lehigh Gorge Trail as well. The Lehigh Gorge Trail, as the name implies, is a trail that goes through the Lehigh Gorge, which is just beyond Jim Thorpe Junction. We are now on the final approach to Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. We'll now hop off the train and join my dad at Jim Thorpe Station and watch as 2102 makes a grand arrival into town.
Woo!
With the train now at a stop, let's hop off and see what we can get into. Jim Thorpe is a classic town located in eastern central Pennsylvania, located on both sides on the Lehigh River. The town is home to this classic Central Railroad of New Jersey station known as the Mouse Chunk Station. We'll talk about why the station has a different name when we leave town. This station was built in 1888 by the C&J and designed by the Wilson Brothers and Company. It's a 1.5-story, 5-bay red brick building designed with a Queen Anne style. The building's most distinguishing feature is its 3.5-story cylindrical corner tower. Today, the Reading and Northern's Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway operates regular tourist trains from the depot and into the nearby Lehigh Gorge. This is also where the Reading and Northern's Bud Car trains stop and the end terminus for the new Iron Horse Rambles. When we got off, we met up with my dad and had lunch at one of the various vendors at the station. While we were eating, 2102 and the train were taking back the Jim Thorpe Junction to be turned around for the return journey later that day. While the turnaround was happening, the 11 o'clock train for the Lehigh Gorge Scenic Railway pulled back into the station, finishing its first run of the day. After eating lunch, we relocated north of the station along Lehigh Avenue. Lehigh Avenue follows the tracks heading uphill, giving a great vantage point for seeing trains from. In the foreground, we can see the roof of the Ramble we rode in on. The Ramble had been turned around and was waiting for the 1 o'clock Lehigh Gorge train to pass. After the Lehigh Gorge train got by, the two diesels pulled the Ramble past the C&J station. Pulling the Ramble was Reading and Northern 3052 and 3059. Both engines are SD40-2s. 3052 was built in 1980 for the Missouri Pacific Railroad as their 6072, and 3059 was built in 1979 for the Southern Railway as their 3327. 3059 during its southern years was originally a high hood, but was later rebuilt with a standard cab in 2012. The two engines took the train and stored it south of town for the later return journey. After watching both trains, we then walked back down to the parking lot along the Lehigh Gorge Trail, where we walked back to see where 2102 was being serviced. At this end of the yard, there was a buzz of activity, not only with the railway workers, but also with the general public, as they had walked back here to see the like-new T1. When we got here, they were in the process of refilling 2102's tender with water, which was being supplied by the Reading and Northern's water tank car. Normally, when Reading and Northern 425 pulls similar trains here, they use the turntable to turn the engine around, but thanks to 2102's length, the T1 is too long for the turntable, hence the reason why they use Jim Thorpe Junction. Besides 2102, there was another set of decently famous locomotives here as well. Located on the adjacent track was Reading and Northern 270 and 275, two of the former executive locomotives used by Norfolk Southern. Reading and Northern 270 is a classic EMD F9A built in 1952 for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad as their 937. In the 1980s, the engine was sold to MARC, Maryland's commuter railroad, where it pulled many commuter trains in Maryland. Sometime in the late 1990s or early 2000s, the engine was then sold to the St. Louis Car Company and moved to St. Louis, Missouri. There it stayed, hauling occasional excursion trains out of the old St. Louis Union Station until it was sold to Norfolk Southern. In early 2007, the engine, now numbered 4270, emerged from the Juniata shops in Altoona, Pennsylvania, wearing a very nice Norfolk Southern Railway style paint scheme. Once out of the shops, 4270, along with 275, which was numbered 4275 at the time, and another FA and FB unit, pulled Norfolk Southern's executive train all across the system for many years. Sadly, the fun came to an end in 2019 when Norfolk Southern announced that they were retiring the F units. 4270 and 4275, which were now numbered to 270 and 275, respectively, were sold off to the Reading and Northern Railroad in late 2019. Once on the railroad, they painted them into this great Reading and Northern paint scheme. Reading and Northern 275 is a classic EMD F7B unit built in 1950 for the Chicago and Great Western Railroad as their 113D. 113D stayed on the Chicago and Great Western even after it merged with the Chicago and Northwestern Railroad, where it was renumbered to 410. Eventually, it was sold to the St. Louis Car Company and has the same history as 270 up front. Another engine in the yard today is Reading and Northern 1542, an EMD MP15DC, built in 1982 originally for the Southern Railway, as their 2426. As we were looking at 1542, the 1 o'clock gorge train rolled through the yard, caboose first. Today's Lehigh Gorge Scenic Train consists of 1 caboose and 9 passenger cars. I believe the caboose leading the train in today is an ex-Reading caboose, but I cannot confirm this. Behind the caboose is Reading and Northern 22 Appalachian Trail, 20 Summer Wind, 11 Spring Song, number 9 The Autumn Breeze, LGSR 216 and 215, RNN 213 Lake Hato, 214 Hawk Mountain, and 451. As soon as the gorge train got past, 1524 and 2102 both pulled out onto the main line. Once both engines were on the main line, 2102 began to back itself down back to the Jim Thorpe station. Once out of the way, 1542 pulled back onto the same track it came off of to go and grab the water tank car. With 2102 done here, we began to walk back to the train station. As we were walking back, we then saw 1542 again pulling the water tank car down the track in the yard. Once back at the station area, the crew of 2102 parked the engine and set up some stairs leading up to the cab. For the remaining time we were here, the crew of 2102 was letting both passengers and visitors climb into the cab of the famed T1. Of course, we couldn't miss out on this opportunity, and we got in line to get into the cab of 2102.
This has been like a childhood dream of mine always. It's like, oh my god, this is awesome.
This is really impressive.
After seeing the cab of 2102, we then went back to the train station to watch the 3 o'clock Gorge train depart the station. Leading today's Lehigh Gorge Scenic Train is Reading and Northern 2013, an EMD GP38-2, built in 1973, originally for the Southern Railroad as their 5070.
They have their work cut out for them.
Where's that in Cleveland? Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So?
Thanks to this one, I've seen all 4
As soon as the Gorge train left town, 2102 began to back down the tracks. It was now time for the moment everyone was waiting for, the photo run by. As 2102 waited for the signal, all the passengers, visitors, rail fans, and practically everyone in town came out to see the engine strut its stuff. Unfortunately for me, my shot got ruined, because not only did my camera fog up, but a person next to me leaned in with their camera phone right into the middle of my shot, right at the moment 2102 came by. Luckily for me, my dad actually stuck around and got to watch the photo run by. Now let's move to his camera to get a better view of 2102 as it runs by the station. Now, with the photo run by done, 2102 began to back down to its passenger cars to pull the train back into the station. There were plans for a second run by, but thanks to the amount of time spent letting people explore the cab of 2102 and making sure people were out of the way for the first run by, that meant there was less time to do 2 run bys, as the Reading and Northern had scheduled the Ramble to leave Jim Thorpe promptly at 3:45. Despite not getting the second run by, we got a grand show as 2102 made a dramatic entrance back into Jim Thorpe Station with the train in tow. With the train now back at the station, the passengers quickly got back on board, and promptly at 3:45 p.m., the train departed Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania.
Oh, I'm like just right here. You start coming through what you want. I'm talking about it. You stop. Yeah, you want to get to your best.
As we leave Jim Thorpe, let's talk about the reason why Jim Thorpe Station is called Mouse Chunk Station. The reason why it's called Mouse Chunk Station is because when the town was founded in 1818, it wasn't called Jim Thorpe. It was originally named Mouse Chunk, Pennsylvania. It stayed that way until 1954, when Mouse Chunk merged with its neighboring town across the Lehigh River. It was decided to rename the new bigger town as Jim Thorpe, in honor of James Francis Thorpe. James was a Native American who was famous for winning 2 gold medals for the United States during the 1912 Summer Olympics and played American football, professional baseball, and basketball. With our train now out on the road, my dad was now out on the chase. On the return journey back to Reading, the toughest part of the run, as I said earlier, will be between Nuscahoning Junction and the Industrial Road Railroad crossing west of Nuscahoning, Pennsylvania. Here, the grade averages between 1 and 1/4%. This will be a tough climb for the T1. We'll now hop off the train and join my dad at the Nuscahoning Tunnel. Here, we get a great view of 2102 muscling its train through the short tunnel uphill. We are now approaching the Marion Avenue Railroad crossing west of Hometown, Pennsylvania. Here, we got off again and watched as 2102 conquers the hill here from Hometown Trestle. Once the train conquered the climb at Hawks Junction, we are now on the gentle descent to Reading, Pennsylvania.
Oh, my brother's gonna be okay. He's in a vestibule.
After passing through the Tamaqua Tunnel safely in the passenger cars, we'll hop off the train once again and watch as the train rushes by the classic Reading Railroad Depot in Tamaqua, Pennsylvania.
Nice and slow.
Oh, there you are. I was looking all over the train for you guys. For a minute there, I thought you guys didn't get back on in Tamaqua. Anyway, we are now making our next stop in Port Clinton, Pennsylvania. The passengers who boarded here earlier will now depart the train once it comes to a stop here. As we pass the steam shops here, Reading and Northern 802 can be seen on one of the stall tracks here. 802 is an EMD SW8 built in 1950 originally for the Lehigh Valley Railroad as their 253. Once the passengers that had boarded here got off the train, 2102 pulled out of Port Clinton, putting on a grand show for all the passengers still on board.
Before we return to the station, we encourage you to make a walk back to our car. There's still plenty of t-shirts, pens, magnets, and other goodies available. Go back there and see Marie and Bob and Jen and Mary, and they will be happy to take care of you.
We are now on the final approach to Reading as we pass by the small town of Leesport. We'll now hop off the train and watch as 2102 finishes its very first run at the Reading Outer Station. With the train now stopped at the platform, we disembarked the train and rejoined my dad at the platform. Once reunited, we then made our way to the front of the train just to see the star of the show. When we got there, the crew of the 2102 was in the middle of doing general maintenance around the locomotive. While we were looking at 2102, some diesels came along and removed the passenger cars from the locomotive. They then put the passenger cars on the siding next to 2102.
I was reading that big chunk of coal with the
A little after the passenger cars were pushed into the siding, 2102 then proceeded back to the platform. At the platform, 2102 was attached to a water tender. This water tender belongs to the Reading and Northern's other steam locomotive, 425. Once attached to the tender, 2102 then began to back down into the yard just north of the station here. After seeing 2102 here, we then drove up to Leesport. Here we saw 2102 one more time as the T1 got back to Port Clinton for the rest of the night. It was being led by two of the Reading and Northern's SD40-2s.
I wish they didn't leave.
As 2102 and the diesels continued down the line, this now brings us to the end of this odyssey of a video. We had a blast riding behind this beautiful Northern. We'll definitely be returning to this railroad. The Reading and Northern is a class act and a gem of Pennsylvania. If you wish to ride behind this beautiful T1 or any of the other excursions the Reading, Blue Mountain and Northern operates, you can go visit their website at https://www.rbmnrr-passenger.com/. There, you can buy a ticket and ride on any of the Reading and Northern's passenger trains whenever they're available. You can also check out their Facebook page and Instagram to be notified when the Reading and Northern tickets go on sale and what types of trains they'll be operating. If you get the chance to see or ride behind this beautiful engine, I highly recommend doing so. Before I end the video, I'd like to give a special thanks to my dad. Thank you, Dad, for chasing the train. I know it was hard work, but thanks to the work you did for this video would have not been as great as it had if you had not been involved. Again, thank you so much for helping. It's amazing to see this engine running out on the main line, especially at high speeds. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. We all had a blast riding behind this locomotive, and we'll definitely be back here in the future to come see this beautiful T1. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I all hope you have a good day. See you later!